Hello there, psychology students. Today we're talking about a famous experiment from 1951. That's almost 70 years ago now. It's conducted by a guy named Solomon Asch, and it was on the subject of conformity. So this, for those reasons, is known to psychologists today as the Asch Conformity Experiment. So when we're talking about conformity, we're really talking about like following the crowd, doing what other people are doing, sort of conforming to the norms, following the norms set by your peers or by society as a whole. And so what we're going to dive into is here is how Solomon Asch designed an experiment to test the extent to which people are influenced by other people around them. All right, so let's just look at this at a glance. We've got these 6 people here. They're all smiling, happy. They all appear to be participants. We've got our psychologist here, Solomon Asch, and we've got a set of lines. Now, what the participants are being asked to do, or the participant, which is this guy right here in blue, what he's being asked to do is identify which line A, B, or C is equal to or the same length as this test line here over on the left. So in this case, he'd look at it and he'd say, well, at first glance, it's hard to tell, but we can see that the test line's like a little bit farther forward, and it's definitely shorter than A, and so it's probably B. So if he was being tested by himself, our innocent participant here would get that right 99% of the time. He would get it right almost every time. Maybe every time, depending on who it is. But remember, this experiment's not really about how people perceive lines. It's more about how people respond to social pressure. So who's providing the social pressure in this case? In this case, we've got 5 Confederates, 5 people who've also been recruited by the experimenter, and they've been told ahead of time, you need to give the wrong answer. So these stooges, these Confederates, they're in on it with Solomon Asch, the experimenter. And so they give the wrong answer like 10 out of 15 times. And this experiment is to see how often our participant here is going to go along with them and also give the wrong answer, given that he would never give the wrong answer on his own. So or it could be a she, they are the subject of our experiment. How are they going to respond to what these participants are doing in this sort of strange situation that's been designed for them? All right, so we've got 2 groups here, as always with an experiment. We've got our control group where there are no stooges. So our independent variable, the presence of social influence, it's not there. There's nobody trying to influence them. They have almost 100% accuracy for all participants. So they get an A+. If you're wondering where this picture comes from, it comes from a website about dental health. Just fun fact. Now, we've also got the experimental group. And in the experimental group, they have to answer in a group of stooges, like I just said. And those Confederates are going to give the wrong answer. It turns out that participants went along with the wrong answer 37% of the time. So instead of getting 100% accuracy, they only had like 63% accuracy. It's like a D-. And if you're wondering where I got this picture of a D-, it's from an article about, I think it was titled something like, Boy grades his ex-girlfriend's apology letter, or something like that. So that's where that picture comes from, if you were wondering about that. Just another fun fact. All right, so what happens? What is the result of this experiment? Well, we know 25%, we know that participants go along and conform to answers they know are wrong a really high percentage of the time. But sort of to dive into the details here, we could say 25% participants refuse to agree with any incorrect responses. So 25% of people, about a quarter of people, they could have been in the control group. The the social influence that we're worried about here, the presence of these stooges had no effect on them. That's a quarter of people are just, they're immune. All right. So, but that means that 3/4 of people at least once just felt overwhelmed. They felt crazy or they felt conspicuous, and they went along with what they knew was an incorrect answer. So, obviously, this is something Solomon Asch finds very interesting, as you can see by the way he's holding his pipe there. Now, 50% of participants conform to the group more than half the time. So, about half of people are going to give an incorrect answer to a question they know 100% what the correct answer is. They're going to give that incorrect answer more often than they're going to give the correct answer. And then there's sort of another group in between. It's another quarter of the population that will conform sometimes, but only like a couple times. Then they say, no, I'm right, and they're wrong, and they stick to their guns. So that's the Asch Conformity Experiment. Sort of summarize here, conducted in 1951. The hypothesis was that group pressure can lead people to pretend they have beliefs they don't really have, and the results pretty much confirm that hypothesis. Majority of participants conform at least once, and but at least half of them conform. Half of them stick to their guns more often than they conform, which is a significant point. You know, if you ever hear people discuss peer pressure as if it's impossible to defy peer pressure, well, for half of the population, they're going to defy peer pressure, conformity pressures, more than half the time, more often than not. And so I think, I mean, in some ways, we tend to interpret Asch as an experiment proving how important conformity is in human society, but we should note that there's a lot of really individualistic, non-conformist, people who stick to what they want to do or what they think is right, no matter what. That's like half of people, so that's a lot. So I guess one of the questions that Asch's experiment always leaves me with is the question, what do you think you would do? If you had been in the situation of Asch's participants, would you have conformed or would you have refused to conform? Or would you have been in that middle group? I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities. And we will never really know for sure, especially now that I've told you about the experiment. You'd probably be on your guard if you went in for a psychology experiment that was replicating this now. So we'll never really know for sure, but what do you think you would do? All right, that's all I've got to tell you about the Asch Conformity Experiment. If you want to talk more about it, or you've got any questions, feel free to, make an appointment with me on Zoom or send me an email. Thanks, guys.